And would now like to hand over to Jared. So Vandana, member of our team who we all know and love, suggested asking Jared to come and present on the call because she had seen an awesome presentation from him and thought we could create a condensed version of it. So Jared's here to talk about building your first agent for ERP and how we can customize the experience for F&O. So Jared, I'll hand over to you.
All right, thank you. So far, I'm loving the call. Great content presented already, Mariano. Thank you, and enjoying the chat with the community here. The topic that I'm going to be talking through is on extending and customizing AI agents, and I'm trying to share my screen here.
Jared, you're beloved already. I don't know if you can see the chat at the same time.
He was Dynamics Mind, and he had a full house. It was crazy.
My computer is slowly trying to catch up to the chat, but yes. So I see many on the calls that I've recently had in-person conversations with. I attended a couple of conferences and presented on this same topic. So it's always exciting to see enthusiasm for this topic, but also just opportunities to connect with the community. I love it when we can speak and interact and talk about the topics that we're thinking about from a Microsoft perspective and how it's going to impact your business. So like you mentioned, this is kind of a condensed version of presentation that we do when we talk in community or go to conferences. So it'll be an overview, but excited to continue with conversation and questions and comments and provide some materials where you can pick up the content that we'll talk about here in the discussion and begin working with AI in your environment. So we'll start, just to start off, we'll talk about the Agentic ERP platform and setting the stage of the tools and abilities that you have to extend and customize AI experiences using the data and business logic of your business applications. And that last point is key, that AI is awesome. Large language models are fantastic, they're powerful, and they've really set a revolution of technology over the last few years, building out scenarios that we couldn't automate before, things that we couldn't do because large language models trained on language are really good at understanding human communication. And so we want to take advantage of that by using that AI and those large language models to manage generative orchestration within your organization, use the reasoning of these of large language models to orchestrate across activities that are happening in your organization. But at the same time as we're looking at that, we see a huge opportunity for business applications to contribute to this agentic platform. So just talking through this, we have a high level at the top of the stack, we have our user experiences, where we have the application where the user can sign in, they're working in the application and have AI generated experiences and content presented to them at a UX layer. But below that, we have the agentic layer, the agent orchestration, the foundation that's primarily powered by Copilot Studio. That's where our large language models sit. That's where we have our orchestration that is looking at all the things that you can do in a business application and then managing the orchestration of those activities as we build agents on top of that functionality. Where we have business services contributing to this platform is the data and business logic that we can bring into the conversation on top of those agents. One of the things that I think is a misconception of large language models is that they just know everything. And we kind of have that misconception that we go to the chat GPT and we ask a question and it just knows. I ask, what is AS400? It just knows. I ask a lot of things and it just knows the answer because it's been trained on essentially the entire internet. But where we want to temper that expectation is that large language models are language models. They are really good at understanding language. They're really good at generating language content. They're really good at understanding communication between two individuals and giving you the ability as a human to communicate in natural language with your system. But it doesn't do business logic. It doesn't do calculations natively. A really good example of that is when ChatGPT first came out, or GPT 1.0, the initial models that were released, you would go and ask a question and you could ask, what's 2 + 2? And it would know. because somewhere on the internet, that's a common language pattern to say 2 + 2 = 4. But if you went anything beyond that and asked any two random 10-digit numbers, what's one number plus another number, it would get it wrong. It would hallucinate. It would make up an answer because it's looking at it from a language perspective, not a native calculation perspective. So we want to make sure that when we build these agents on top of our business applications and platforms, that we are using the native data and business logic of that application to perform those operations. So to enable that, we have a huge amount of data and business logic in our Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations apps. There's over 1 billion lines of code in our code base at this point. That's from our base code plus extensions that have been added on top of that from ISVs, from many of you on the call that have written and are responsible for a lot of that code across the planet. That is a huge amount of business logic that is very deterministic. It's often defined in law how those calculations must happen. And so that it's been written into code how we do those calculations, like a calculation of depreciation, or a calculation for a customer balance, or your debits and credits within a financial statement, or how we're printing those financial statements. All of that is very deterministic and can't be something that we're just throwing to a large language model to predict the language that needs to come out of it. So when we have this agent foundation, where we have agents that are using that generative orchestration and the power of large language models to perform those operations, we need to ground that in the business logic by calling into our agent business services built on finance and operations apps, data and business logic, bringing that extra power from our applications into the agent layer. So when we talk about agents, there's a spectrum of experiences that we've built for our finance and operations apps that vary in complexity. So we have our just basic retrieval, which is primarily our chat experiences. So we have a sidecar chat panel in F&O. You've probably seen that. It was released last year, where you can slide that out and start chat experiences. We have embedded AI experiences that are just using a natural language prompt to perform some operations under data within the context of your application and bring that as an insight within the application. So these are out-of-box experiences that you have available to you that have opportunities for extension and customization on top of those. With the next level of complexity is prompted operations. So you can create an operation within your application and use and have that prompted either through a trigger or through a conversation to be able to trigger those operations and have that as something that is done within your organization. And then moving further along this road is autonomous agents that can perform independent operations. They are operating independently. They have their own dynamic plan based on that generative orchestration within the agent platform to perform the operations that it's been given access to and given knowledge about. So some of those from the autonomous agents, I want to call out specifically that these were just released in public preview. These are available now. I encourage you to go take a look at these. We won't dig into the details of each of these in this call, but these are things where we are automating processes using AI operations connected to the business logic of your applications. So time and expense from our project operations apps and approvals from project operations. From supply chain management, we have a supplier communication agent. From finance, account reconciliation agent, and from field service, the scheduling operations agent that bring in AI using those large language models to automate business processes so we can perform an operation and bring a human into the loop to approve and review those operations that have happened. A really good example of that is a supplier communication agent, because we're automating things that haven't been done before, that we couldn't automate prior to AI being involved. In this example, with supplier communications agent, we're receiving an email from a vendor. And rather than a human having to go in and read that email and understand the context of the email and then open up finance and operations and perform an operation, we can have an AI agent automatically read and process that email, understand the intent of that email based on the language, and then call back into our business system to perform an operation or create a pending operation that is presented to a user to say, this is what has been requested from this vendor. This is how it will impact the supply chain. Here's the suggested operation, approve, reject, delegate, or whatever needs to happen as a human workflow on top of that after it's already been pre-processed and taken some of that operation off the hands of a human. So we're removing a lot of the drudgery from the work that can be done, freeing up humans to perform more high-value operations within the organization rather than having to read through emails all day. If I could remove email from my list of things to do every day, it'd save a huge amount of time. But these are some of the things that we can do, is using AI to understand language and summarize that and bring that into our business processes. Looks like my computer's slowly trying to keep up with me. So on the next slide, when it does load, is a high-level overview of the architecture of the interaction pattern. So once we get into building agents, extending and customizing these experiences, this is the overall model that we're looking at. So this is where you, as a user, as a maker, as somebody who is deeply involved in your business processes, once you start bringing AI into these experiences, this is the overall model of how this works. That we have our inputs. Well, the primary orchestration layer is based in Copilot Studio, where we have our agent built. That's where we have our generative orchestration with our large language models. We have instructions that have been given to that agent in natural language. So it's a fairly straightforward process to configure these agents because we're using natural language to instruct the agent on how to perform the operations that it's working on. And then a list of tools that are the things that it knows how to do, the things that it's been granted access to do based on security model and things that it knows how to do, is a list of those things to be added. Then we need to trigger that agent. That can be either through system events, that could be business events or data events coming from finance and operations, or other events that are built into the ecosystem. User messages or prompts, and then agent messages that are triggering the agent operation. But when this tool is determined by the generative orchestration that it needs to be called, we call back into our system to either run the business logic or get the data that is necessary to fulfill that operation, bring that back into the agent so that we can give a response back as output to the user. So we're always making sure that we're grounding these operations in the data and business logic of your applications. As we get into the next level of just thinking through, how do you get started? How do I get started as a user building AI experiences for F&O, for Dynamics 365 ERP? And there's this isn't a comprehensive list, but this is the types of building blocks that you can use when you jump into Copilot Studio to start building on the experiences that we have out of box, and building your own experiences with custom agents as you look at the experiences that you want to build and extend for your AI experiences in F&O. That we're taking the low-code AI tools that are built on the Power Platform and using that as our basis for the generative orchestration and connecting it to the data and business logic of your ERP application. So things like topics that are kind of declarative flows that are step-by-step that we can be added directly in Copilot Studio. Agent flows are similar, as they are a tool set for us to bring the abilities of Power Automate directly into your agent in Copilot Studio. So we can have those deterministic flows and operations that are performed with Power Automate, that bringing that whole tool set directly into Copilot Studio. Prompts that are natural language statements, instructions, things that we can tell the agent how to do and save those as prompts that can be used in our system to tell the agent what to do. So it's removing those pro code experiences from the requirements of being able to build these experiences and just commanding it in natural language, which is extremely powerful in using those LLMs to perform these AI operations. And then connectors and other tools that are available for us to connect to the data and business logic of both F&O and other systems. And then using that as a communication pattern down into our ERP system, where we're using knowledge, which is all of the rich data that you have in your system, to be able to register that as a knowledge source in Copilot Studio in your agent, to be able to communicate with your data and chat with your data in natural language, or bring that into an autonomous flow as information that is included in your operations. We have our events. As we discussed, these could be used as triggers of data events and business events, using that business events framework for F&O to be used as triggers for those operations and create those autonomous agents. Client plugins are another tool that we can use to connect to the business logic of our application, where we are connecting directly to a class in F&O and executing our X++, executing business logic with it directly within the application from F&O. A client plugin is used within the context of the sidecar chat panel in F&O, where we're saying that this is capability that we're adding in AI to be invoked by our AI agent, but is invoking directly X++ that is applicable within the context of our client application from the sidecar chat panel. So we can do things like navigate through the application or filter a list or perform other operations within the client from natural language in that chat because of that invocation of code from our client plugins. And then AI plugins is similar in that we are opening up, and this is the agent, a component of our agent business services that the agent layer can communicate directly with our backend code, invoking that X++ as a headless operation as an AI plugin, that we can register that in a custom Copilot, in a Teams chat, or anywhere that we need to have that operation exposed and invoke the business logic of our application. So a canonical example that we typically use is calculating a customer balance. Something as simple as that requires some code to be run because it's not just a field that sits in the database. It's a runtime calculation that we need to look at the customer, we need to gather some information, we need to run a calculation, and then we present that to the user. So we can't just do a get on a OData API to get a customer balance. But we can do that from an agent by invoking that code, using that deterministic logic that's already built into the application, and bring that back as a response to our agent to bring that back. We can do similarly by doing things like summarizing payment information, or summarizing invoices, or just any headless operation that we need to be exposed to our AI layer can be invoked directly in that X++ using those AI plugins. And then finally down here, we'll talk in a minute about Dynamics 365 ERP MCP, the Model Context Protocol, where we've built a Model Context Protocol server that is exposed in Copilot Studio and is available to other agent platforms that are compatible with this protocol to be able to invoke business logic in our backend system. So if we look at just a quick example that brings together a lot of these components to show how we can use prompts, how we can use an agent, how we can use deterministic code, and also call back into our system to run operations and register knowledge sources on our F&O virtual entities to be able to bring in the data and business logic of our application into an agent scenario without having to write any code. So we'll run this, and let me make sure I'm sharing my sound.
F&O virtual entities are available as knowledge sources in Copilot Studio, giving agents much more flexibility in the use of ERP data. When adding a knowledge source to an agent, if I search for MSERP, it shows me the list of all virtual entities that have been generated in this environment and are available to be added as knowledge sources to this agent. In this example, I've added a couple of entities that show me customer and sales information for my collections team agent, giving me the ability to ask questions in natural language about this data. For example, when I publish this agent to Teams, I can then ask questions in natural language, like asking ad hoc queries about the primary contact information, or asking it to summarize some data in the related knowledge source tables, or asking it to give me a table of some filtered data with some conditional formatting. All of this enabled by having it available as a knowledge source. Knowledge sources also contribute to scenarios with autonomous agents. In this agent, I've added an autonomous trigger that sends an email to the customer anytime an invoice is posted for that customer, reminding them of any outstanding balance. In this example, we'll use a previously posted invoice to test the operation. When this runs and we trigger the flow, we can see the prompt that's invoked that will invoke business logic using actions, but also use knowledge sources to gather information like primary email address, organization name, credit balance and credit rating, and other information that will be used to send the email and be included in the body of the email. Rather than needing to code explicit actions to go get each piece of information, we have much more flexibility by just asking for this data using a prompt that is then used over knowledge sources. If we then look at the email, we see that the required information was gathered and sent to the appropriate email address based on the knowledge source that was gathered in that operation.
All right, so it's a quick example that brings together a lot of those building blocks that we talked about on the previous slide to show that we can, without much effort, to be able to pull together some of those experiences, connecting to the data and business logic of our application, and build AI experiences for scenarios that you want automated using those large language models and AI, bringing that into the experience and grounding it in your data and business logic. Let's talk.
Virtual entities are available.
Quickly, let's talk about Dynamics 365 ERP MCP. This was an announcement that we announced at Build just a couple of weeks ago that we now have available for Dynamics 365 ERP, a model context protocol server. And I'll start with just a quick recording and demo of what that experience looks like in using our MCP server to add functionality to an agent really quickly and easily, streamlining this experience. And this is something that will continue to grow as we go forward in using MCP, which is a standard industry protocol for opening up additional opportunities to connect to the data and business logic of the application.
Procurement is a multitasking balancing act of data digging, supplier research, analysis, and communication. This can become even more complex, as in healthcare, where timely, cost-effective supply delivery is critical to both the organization and the people they serve. Maya, a procurement specialist, is working to get time-sensitive medical supplies. She uses an AI procurement agent to help review requisitions, find suppliers, and issue purchase orders. The agent autonomously validates incoming purchase requisitions against company policies. For each item, it checks existing inventory and delivery records to find a suitable supplier based on speed, cost, sustainability, and risk. If the same supplier is identified for multiple items, it consolidates them into one purchase order. Let's see how one of these agents is created. In Copilot Studio, a maker can simply describe what they want an agent to do. In this case, they want to create an agent that will review new requisitions against company policies, find the best suppliers for each product, and issue purchase orders to those suppliers. They name it, press Create, and then add concrete capabilities and reasoning. Choosing an MCP server for ERP, this model context protocol catalogs and coordinates the actions agents can perform and the data they can access to complete complex goals. These can be modified at the server level without touching client code, and can even use additional MCP servers made by partners to integrate with multiple systems. With that set, simply publish. And with that, the procurement agent is up and running, ready to transform requisitions into point of sale, and point of sale into products in hand, helping to ensure critical supplies reach their destination on time and in full.
Model context protocol.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not sure who was saying model context protocol, but yes, that's the topic here that we're for model context protocol. That gives an overview, and I like the way that we pulled together this scenario that we enabled the model context protocol server and made that available for release. It's in public preview now, currently rolling out to environments. So you may not yet see it in your environment. It's in a 6-week rollout train that will hit all environments by the end of June. So if you don't see it in your environment today, hold on, it'll be there soon. But we want you to start playing around with it. What is available in your environment today for that MCP server exposes 13 operations. So it's a very limited, very, very limited subset of the operations that are available across all of F&O. And that's kind of our initial foray into Model Context Protocol to release it and make it available for you to, as simply as it showed in the video, add that server to an agent, and then you have access automatically to all of the operations that are available on that server. This will continue to grow. This is a core priority for our team to continue to expand on this MCP functionality to be able to bring more and more functionality to our agents through this MCP server. So look for more announcements coming on that, but this is something that we're working hard to make sure is quickly expanding to expose more operations and make that a streamlined experience. But the experience, the benefits here is that we have a streamlined workflow, that the data and business logic of the application is exposed through a server, and all you need to do is add that server that brings context, understands the context of your agent, and can expose the correct contextual operations that are available to that agent, so then you're up and running without needing to add additional configuration. So simplifying that agent development experience. It's also using a single standard protocol. MCP wasn't developed by Microsoft, but it's being taken up by Microsoft rapidly so that we can participate in the AI community. It's a protocol that just manages the relationship between the agent platform and backend systems. And because we're built using that protocol, you can take our server and connect it to any agent platform. Copilot Studio is still going to be our primary platform, but you could use that server on any agent platform that supports the protocol, and then removes that need for hard coding because those operations are just exposed automatically through the MCP server. The experience is just bringing that directly into your agent, and then you're off and running with those natural language instructions that you give to it to tell it what it is that you want it to do based on the context available to it. So this is a priority. I'm excited to continue working on this, and we'll have more announcements coming up on it. But please go give it a try. Where you can get information on that, well, if you want to get in touch, here's my information. And here is a link where you can go get more information on the things that we talked about here on the call, including some tutorials. That list of tutorials I will continue to grow over time. There's a few other demos that I want to put in there just to give ideas to the community on things that you can do with AI and the power that it brings when we bring the context of our business logic and data from our business applications into that agent layer. So go take a look at it and get in contact with me if you have questions, comments. I'd love to continue the conversation.